Hello, angels. Welcome to Humanitarian Chronicles, where I highlight extraordinary people doing extraordinary things. I am Abby Lodmer, conscious comedian, health coach, life coach, and I am here today with the magnificent pet nutrition guru, Nora Lenz. Nora has been teaching and learning about dog and animal health and nutrition for over 20 years. She's been inspiring dog owners, myself included, dog parents, I like to call us, to declare their independence from the sick pet industry via her website nomorevetbills.com for 10 years. She bases her philosophy on the true science of health, natural hygiene, which holds that disease is impossible if all the conditions that produce health are in place. Her online books, essays, and websites are mind-blowingly inspiring and educational and scientifically accurate. And I am just so honored to welcome you, Nora, to the show, one of my real-life heroines. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow, thanks for that stellar introduction. I'm happy to be here.
Look at your sweet little furry fur baby right there. Hi, Angel!
She's one of my visitors.
I love it. All the homies have come out for this. Well, how did you get into this, first and foremost? How did you become so passionate about animal health?
Well, I guess it started when I read the very first health book that I ever read in my life, and that was Diet for a New America way back in 1986. And then shortly after that, I read Fit for Life, and Fit for Life had a bigger, I won't say bigger, but it did have a big influence on me. And but I felt it was a bit too radical at the time, so I kept researching, and I changed my own diet. And then I've always loved animals, and I've always had animals, so I wanted to apply whatever I learned about health to them too. And I started doing that very slowly, starting about 30 years ago. It took me a long time to actually get to raw feeding. Information was kind of hard to come by 30 years ago. But I did eventually start applying it to my animals, and it really works. And now it's just astounding to me with the internet that people don't have this information. They should have this information.
Well, that's why you're here, and that's why I'm passionate about featuring you. So thank you for being here to share this. Yeah, let's jump right in. You just mentioned raw feeding. Well, first and foremost, what are the biggest contributors to diseases in dogs? Animals, but dogs mainly.
Right. Well, the biggest contributor to disease, the biggest cause of disease in all organisms, humans included, is the accumulation of waste in the body, and that's a condition called toxemia.
Right.
And when the body gets saturated in its own waste, it can't eliminate it fast enough, it can't keep up with all the waste that's coming in, then it institutes extraordinary elimination symptoms, and we call those colds and flus. Well, dogs and cats get those too, particularly when they're kittens and puppies, and they go from eating the best foods on earth, or the best food on earth, mother's milk, to the worst direct that humankind ever devised, which is commercial pet food. And they get the runny eyes, the goopy eyes, the runny nose, and then they get medicated and vaccinated on top of that, and some of them don't survive. But that is constructive disease. That's the body trying to relieve itself of the burden. And
yeah.
the other kind of disease is degenerative disease, and that's when this the presence of waste in the bloodstream and in the body has actually compromised the functionality of an organ, and that's not beneficial. It's not constructive. It is, however, most of the time reversible, and we don't hear very much about reversing disease from vets and from other medical professionals, but it's sort of the best kept secret in the world that disease can be reversed. It doesn't have to be managed. So anyway, waste going in is the biggest contributor to disease, and the biggest source of waste is, of course, what you eat or what a dog eats. And dogs eat much as bad as we humans eat, civilized humans. Dogs eat much worse because they eat the garbage that's left over from the garbage that's produced to feed us. So it's bad. It's all bad.
Yeah, that was my next question. You're psychic. I was going to ask, what is so wrong with eating commercially processed dog food? I'd love for you to expound on that.
Yeah, it's not made to fulfill the nutritional needs of dogs. It's made to make a profit. It was actually invented because these human food manufacturers needed a way to dispose of their waste products profitably. So they thought, hey, dogs have, historically eaten our garbage. Why can't we just make it official and put a label on it and, make some money? And that's where pet food originally came from. So, and the tradition continues. I mean, the pet food companies like to sort of represent that they're experts in nutrition and that they have the pet nutrition market sort of cornered, but nothing could be further from the truth. They know very little about the needs of dogs, actually, and even the higher grade commercial pet foods are not good because it's all about the profit motive. It's not about fulfilling the needs of dogs and we know that because, at least I know it, because I know what dogs need. I know what I feed dogs. I know what keeps them out of the vet's office for decades and decades. And I mean, my last dog didn't have to go to the vet for 11 years. And the last 11 years of his life. So while his health was deteriorating, while he was, aging, he wasn't visiting the vet every, a couple times a year, whatever it is normal. So anyway, I think that answers the question about commercial pet food. But anybody who doesn't know what's in commercial pet food and what's so bad about it, there's a ton of information on the internet nowadays. There's no excuse for not knowing. I think a lot of people don't really want to know what's in commercial pet food, but if you do want to know, the information is there. So we don't need to talk about that.
Well, I actually would love to I'll talk about it, what I've read and learned through you and other experts and actual scientists. And I really love that you mentioned the commercial pet food industry basically regulates themselves and calls themselves experts. It's like the CDC and the American medical mafia industry, regulating themselves, doing their own in-house research. Like, vaccines are safe and effective. Antibiotics are safe and effective. Pharmaceutical drugs are safe and effective. And they're in bed with the FDA and the food that's pure poison as well. So you cannot trust an industry that regulates itself. And unfortunately, a lot of third-party scientists and regulators are paid off by these big money industries like the pet food industry, but mostly like the American Medical Association. That's another whole video altogether. But the same thing is happening with the pet industry. And I am going to talk about what's in pet food. There are euthanized animals that are injected with completely toxic, so toxic that it killed that dog or cat, by the way, that is in your pet's food. I mean, they have found the euthanasia injection drug in commercial pet foods, meaning the commercial pet food industry buys dead corpses from animal shelters. And this is true. I've researched a ton about it. Animal shelters, factory farms, just all these factory farms and animal shelters. So they're basically turning into carnivores, like eating their own, not just carnivores, but cannibals, eating their own species. They don't eat their own species. It's very rare. So cats and dogs are literally eating injected, poisoned, murdered cats and dogs in pet food. And it's
also lab animals that die in labs because they've been, injected with toxic chemicals. Those animals are picked up by the rendering companies and processed into pet food. Right. They don't go to waste. I mean, they don't waste those things. They put them in pet food. That's their waste disposal system.
Right. So that's it, people. Pet food is the industry's waste disposal system. The pharmaceutical companies, the animal shelters, and the factory farms, these industries need to dispose of these corpses somewhere, and they're doing it in your pet food. So, and it's not going to be labeled on the bag. It just says chicken, turkey, It's not going to say turkey that was injected with a lethal chemical to die. It's not going to say that. But if you look at the studies of pet food, there is that chemical in pet food in high amounts. So it's no wonder that these animals are getting tumors, hot spots, flus, colds, like crazy. When you eat out, you eat poison, you're going to get toxic reactions. So, okay, I had to bring that up. So thank you. That is what's wrong with commercial kibble. And not only that, what about the fact that it's cooked 2 or 3 times? Like there's actually zero nutrition at all in commercial kibble because it's so processed, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is cooked repeatedly, and it has to be shelf stable. So they have to, put lots of chemicals in it to make sure it would sit on the shelf for 6 months and not go bad. I mean, any product that can sit on a shelf and not go bad is going to be really, really hard for your body to break down, or a dog's body, or anybody's body.
Right. Amen.
So
yeah,
it's crazy to think that you could have, could sit a kid down in front of a bowl of cereal 3 times a day and have a healthy kid. But that's what we do with dogs.
Well, that's what we do with kids too. So wake up, and I tell my clients that because I'm a health coach for humans mostly, but I've been. Thanks to you and your materials, I've been plagiarizing you and your research and other research I've done to help animals get healthy as well lately a lot. And that's what I tell the pet parents. I say, feeding your dog kibble is like feeding your child pretzels for her whole life. That is what you're doing. You're feeding your child processed, dead, dehydrated, no living nutrient food their whole life. That's what you're doing to your animals. So, okay, I'm glad we touched on that. Thank you. I had to go there. I know they can do their own research, but some people don't. So here's the video that'll give you the Cliff's Notes. There you go. Yeah, and what about freeze-dried or dehydrated foods? Where do you stand on those foods instead of...
Yeah, a lot of people will tell me that their dogs or cats are raw-fed, but then they'll later tell me that what they're feeding is these brands that are freeze-dried. And freeze-drying is probably better than dehydrating. I've read that the cell doesn't burst or whatever when you freeze-dry, but it does when you dehydrate. So I don't understand that particularly, but I do know that when you take water out of food, other things go with the water besides just the water. You can't just put water back in. I like to tell people to think about what a dehydrated strawberry or a potato chip that's had water added back to it would look like next to a potato or a strawberry or a fresh strawberry. And then you have your answer. Well, there's things in the potato and the strawberry that aren't in the dehydrated versions. And so you have to think that there's the food is degraded. So it's definitely not the same as raw feeding. It's not good at all, I don't think. And you still have the problem of the feeding of your dog being left to a third party that is in the business of making money, not necessarily in the business of making sure that your dog is properly nourished.
Right.
You're the only one that can do that.
Right.
The owner's the only one that can do that.
Exactly.
So the more you give up that and feed, commercial foods, the less control you have over your dog's health.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I was dehydrating sweet potatoes to make sweet potato chips for my dog and other dogs that I take care of. But the more I read and water is life. It's just logical. I feel like this whole conversation, we need to get back to logic and truth and stop, like, where does propaganda end and truth begin? I know you talk a lot about that. Like, we got to get away from the propaganda and get back to just plain logic. Water is life. We are 70 to 90% water. Like, we need water. We need to be hydrated with every juicy bite of food. Why is it any different? That's the same for every living organism on Earth. Every organism. They eat some dried fruits and vegetables in nature because that's bacteria they need, but water is life. We need water to stay hydrated. So I make my dog baked sweet potatoes instead of dehydrated because the water is still there. So, yeah, thank you for that. I learned that through you.
For treats, it's fine. I dehydrate meats and liver, and I've never done sweet potatoes or yams, but I suppose you could just for training treats, because you need to have something you can put in your pocket.
Right.
And so dehydrated stuff fits the bill.
I've got the baked stuff in my non-plastic, wax paper bag. So I still do dehydrated treats even when I'm training. But yeah, no, dehydrated treats, they love it. It's crunchy. It's delicious. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because I have a lot of clients and friends who ask about that all the time. Like, well, I get dehydrated patties. It's not the same. It's not the same. But so what do you mean by feeding your dogs raw? What does that mean?
Well, dogs are traditionally have eaten the bodies of herbivorous animals, and whether they, wolves, coyotes, jackals, all kinds of dogs, they eat small animals, large animals. And that's basically what we have to do when we're feeding our dogs at home. And it's not like we don't have access to those foods. Yes, the foods that we have access to are fatty, and I can talk more about that. That's a huge issue that needs to be touched on. But we can buy those foods right down at the supermarket, and you might have to shop around for the best prices. But there's no reason, if everybody is wanting to call their dog or their cat a family member, like is popular now, then there's no reason not to shop for them at the regular grocery store like you do all the other family members. And if you're not willing to do that, then you shouldn't be calling your dog or your cat a family member. Family members don't get thrown in the backyard for their entire lives, and don't get a cup of kibble dumped in a bowl a couple times a day. Family members get treated, they're in the house, they share the lives of the owners, and they get fed properly, just like you want to feed yourself and your kids properly. And when you do that, it's not expensive because it saves you a lot of heartache, it saves your animal a lot of suffering, and it saves you a lot of money in the form of vet bills.
That's right.
So not very many people talk about the connection between pet food and disease, and especially vets don't talk about that connection, but it needs to be talked about because there's a causal connection there, and that needs to be fixed.
Yes.
Now, the foods that our dogs can eat are, we have to adapt what we buy for them based on their size, because wolves aren't the size of a little Chihuahua, and a little Chihuahua can't eat the same foods that a big dog can. So, but it's still entirely doable. I mean, if you have a little dog, you just get little animals like game hens and chickens, and even parts of the turkey are completely consumable by a little dog, and there's no excuse not to. I mean, you can grind. You don't have to grind. Even small dogs can chew bones. But anyway, so we can talk about specific foods later on too.
So you just go to the store and buy like organic, natural, non-GMO, non-hormone, non-antibiotic, please God, game hen, like that's frozen in the frozen.
No, there's really no such thing. I mean, I suppose Whole Foods might sell something like that, and people are always asking me if they should buy free range or organic or whatever. And my opinion is that it's just prohibitive for most people. I guess if I was eating meat, I would eat the best meat that I could buy, but even that might be a challenge because it's very expensive. And if you have a golden retriever or whatever that's going to eat, a pound and a half of food every other day, that's a pretty expensive, thing. And I mean, you can't really find organic free range game hens. A lot of people sorry?
Any animal. That was just an example, but organic, free range, anything. You just go to the store and buy it instead of buying these very expensive prepackaged ground up meat that you scoop out and serve, which I was doing for so long, and I'm broke at the end of every month because of it. But right. So you just go to the store and buy like prepackaged chicken legs or goosenecks or something like that, and you just give your dog that piece of animal.
Yeah. Well, it's a little tricky. You have to know your dog, it's hard for me to generalize because we have little tiny dogs, and that's why I mentioned game hens. And the reason why game hens are good is because the bones are small and consumable by little dogs, and game hens are killed when they're young, so they're not quite as toxic as mature adult chickens. But yes, I mean, and more grocery stores are starting to carry these products that humans don't eat, like chicken backs and chicken necks and turkey necks, and I've even found a store that sells turkey breasts year round.
Wow.
And turkey breasts are really good, especially if you have a dog and a cat, because you can take some of the flesh off to feed to your cat, cats don't need bones so much as much as dogs do. And then you can just feed the bones to your dog. And turkey bones are very consumable by most dogs.
Well, okay.
There's parts that,
so,
sorry?
No, that being said, all you've talked about really is that dogs kind of, I'm hearing, are carnivores. And there's a lot of, I'm a vegan. I know you're a vegan. I've talked to vegan vets. I'm very active in the vegan vet community. And a lot of my vegan vet friends talk about, because dogs are omnivores, they can be herbivores. Where do you stand on that? Is it healthy for a dog to be vegan, in your opinion?
Well, most people who feed raw are very negative about the idea of feeding dogs vegan. For myself, I've seen enough anecdotal evidence to think that, or to cause me to think that, to be kind of open-minded about it. I think dogs are set up primarily to eat the bodies of other animals. But one thing that we know about dogs is that they can go long periods without making a kill. They've tracked wolves that have gone up to 6 months without making a kill, which means they eat very little. And in the summer, if there happens to be a scarcity of prey, they subsist on plant foods. So we know that they can subsist for certain periods of time on plant foods. We just don't know how long. And with some of these stories that we're hearing about vegan dogs being very long-lived, I think, number one, that's a function of the fact that commercial dog food is so bad, because these people who are vegan and they want their dogs to be vegan, they adopt a dog who's fat and in not very good medical condition, and start feeding them vegan, and they notice improvements right away. Well, that's just a function of the relative health of the vegan diet over the really bad consequences of feeding commercial pet food.
Right.
So anyway, I think I just went off on a little tangent there. But
no, it was perfect. I love your little tangents. They're so informative. No, you didn't at all. That's the answer. It's like, okay, so you believe dogs are omnivores. That's really interesting that you said in the wild they go for months, 6 months sometimes at a time, not eating any corpse, any animal. So they can eat plant food. So then, in your booklet, you talk about rotational, a method that you call rotational monofeeding. Can you explain that? Maybe is that something that the animals in the wild do when they're not able to make a kill?
Right. Well, what it kind of mimics what happens in the wild when dogs are not able to get food every day. And we know that dogs evolved in sort of spare economies. There wasn't a lot of food, and what there is, they have to work really hard to get. So our animals aren't, expending as many calories as their wild counterparts.
Right.
And they're getting, probably more calories, especially, because they're fed every day. So it's no wonder that they're fat. But my little plan, my program, my rotational feeding plan, what it does is it allows an owner to continue to feed every day, even though that's probably not the best way to feed. The best way to feed is, the best way to feed a dog is to mimic nature. And in nature, wolves that stuff themselves, they will eat their fill one day. They don't go out and do the same thing the next day. They'll wait a couple of days before they hunt again.
Right.
And that's probably the best model that we could use to feed our own dogs. But people aren't willing to do that. That's a very radical thing to do, to fast your dog every other day. So what my plan does, what my method does, is it gives people something to feed on those otherwise non-feeding days. I tell people who have the fortitude to feed on alternate days, that is, feed your dog meat, mostly meat, but feed them only every other day, to do that. If they don't have the emotional wherewithal to do that and they want to feed their dog every day, they can give them meat one day and then something palatable to the dog the next day that is that's plant-based. And usually dogs will eat apples, pears, bananas, cooked yams, cooked sweet potatoes, sometimes cooked carrots, sometimes other cooked vegetables. All of those things are fine for dogs. They're fine secondary foods for dogs. But what they don't do is they don't contribute fat to the diet. And that's where the conversation about fat needs to come in.
Okay.
Because fat it's huge, because the domesticated animals, the agricultural animals that we're feeding our dogs and cats are deliberately fattened. And they're fattened by feeding them garbage and giving them, drugs and antibiotics and other things that cause them to gain weight and to be fat when they're slaughtered. Oh. So the producers are making money by feeding cheap foods, and they're also making money at the end by having these heavy fattened animals. Yeah. Well, nobody along the supply chain wants to take a hit for that fat. They just pass it along to you. So when you buy the ground meat or whatever, when you buy commercial pet food, all of the fat is still in. You can't do anything about it. If you buy the cut of meat yourself that can be trimmed of fat, you can control that situation a little bit. Not as much as would be ideal, because on the animals that we buy as meat, a lot of times the fat is in places where you can't trim it, like it's between the rib bones or whatever, right. And your dog or cat is going to consume that. So what my rotational monofeeding plan does is it allows people to not overfeed fat. Fat in dogs and cats, dietary fat, is a huge, huge contributor to disease, because all of the waste that was fed to those food animals that they carried around in their fat cells is passed along. The waste goes directly into your cat or dog if you're feeding that fat. So the only way that you can avoid that is to buy the whole cuts of meat and trim as much fat as you possibly can.
Wow, you are just such a font of information. It's so true, and I tell my clients that I'm working with that have diabetes, they've got this sugar is horrible. It ages us. It's terrible for us. I don't even eat fruit personally, usually. I've been eating fruit, and I don't feel as well as I do when I don't eat fruit, but that's another conversation. But I tell my clients who have diabetes, this industry has built itself upon, don't eat sugar, and sugar causes diabetes. No, fat causes diabetes. Fat causes obesity. All, like you were saying, all the chemicals are stored in fat. Chemicals are stored in fat. When you eat animals that have been injected with chemicals, because all of them have, even organic, you're eating those chemicals, which makes you fat. You're kind of dying every bite you eat. You're dying, so your body holds on to fat because it has to preserve itself. So I love that you talk about that. So basically, feed our animals as lean as possible, and ourselves, but our animals too. That's so interesting. Yeah, I deal with a lot of clients who have overweight and obese dogs. So is that what causes obesity in dogs mostly, is eating fat?
Well, a lot of people, when they have dogs that are very fat, they blame the exercise component, because this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, that so much of health problems in humans are blamed on lack of exercise, because nobody in these industries wants to empower us with the information that it's what we eat that determines how fat or slim we're going to be, and not necessarily. You can sit around, and do nothing for the next 6 months, and if you eat the right foods, I guarantee that you're not going to be fat at the end of that. At the end of those 6 months.
Better to exercise, but do the experiment if you don't feel like exercising. No, it's true. For people who are laid up after an injury, if they just change you don't need as many calories when you're not active. Period. End of story. So I know people,
And if you're eating the right foods, your body just doesn't store them in the form of fat.
Right.
But with dogs, people think, oh yeah, I've been so lazy, I've got to get my dog out, and I'm working too much and I can't get my dog out, exercise twice a day or whatever. But really the cause of obesity in dogs is commercial pet food, and primarily the presence of so much fat.
Yeah.
And grains as well. But grains, people have latched onto this grain thing because it gives the pet food producers a way to just change their formulation a little bit, and they're in the clear.
Filler,
too. What they got to do is put pea starch in their kibble instead of grains, And people will go, I'm buying a grain-free food. I'm, feeding my dog properly or whatever. And they think that's all they need to do. So the grain thing, it's been a bit of a red herring. But grains, yes, and grains are not good for dogs,
Wow, that's so interesting that you say that, because when I was feeding my dog vegan, I would look up all these websites and I would try to do the research, and they did have some scientific facts, but like, again, where does propaganda end and truth begin? But I saw a bunch of anecdotal results from a bunch of websites, and they were all of these pet food sites, all of them, for the optimum pet food vegan meal, it had grains. Oatmeal, rice, black rice, wild rice. Well, what about lentils and beans? They have a lot of lentils and beans in the vegan, like for your rotating days, for the days that we don't feed the dog meat, which I'm so happy about, and I'm going to read your booklet again to get on this. I don't want to feed my dog meat every day, but
yeah, that's a good point, because when vegans, it's okay to want to avoid the meat industry. I'm all for that. But you can avoid the meat industry, but if you're going to do that, it looks to me like you can't avoid the vet industry, and the vet industry is almost as bad. They make disease worse, and they don't tell people the truth about how to keep their dogs healthy, and so they're creating this epidemic. This feeding of dogs, a couple times a week, you might even be able to get away with feeding meat as little as 3 or 4 times a month.
Wow! Oh my gosh! Yay! I would love that. But
so if vegans are willing to compromise just that little bit and feed meat, a couple times a month, then they could probably have a healthy dog that's going to be vet-free for life.
Oh my gosh! Okay, I'm going to call you and get a consultation after the show. That is awesome. I can't wait. I'm so excited about that. I don't like feeding her meat all the time. But I love that you mentioned the vet industry, and I really want to delve into that. I see the same things in the Western medical establishment, as I mentioned before. So how do you think vets are contributing to dogs having diseases and animals, the epidemics of disease in animals?
Well, it's just utterly scandalous that a vet can go to school for 8 years and then come out without the knowledge of how to keep a dog healthy. And it's even more astounding that they have this monopoly on, they're considered health practitioners. They have a monopoly on, nobody can talk about disease in dogs unless they have a degree in veterinary science. It's absolutely crazy, because they're learning other things besides health. They're learning like how to turn off symptoms, how to make the most money in their business. All of those things are important to vets. Meanwhile, lay people like myself are looking at, keeping our dogs out of the vet's office, keeping our dogs healthy for life. And it's not like the information isn't obtainable. It's out there. You just have to look for it. And of course, if it's available for someone like me, then there's just no excuse for vets not to have this information. There's no excuse for a dog owner to take their sick dog to a vet, and for a vet to just give a drug and not even mention that where this disease came from or what causes it, to profess ignorance about where the disease, what caused the disease. So in that way, the vets are contributing 100%. But not only that, they've taken an active stance against proper feeding. A couple years ago, the AVMA came out officially. They published a paper that said they're officially opposed to raw feeding, which is just absolutely criminal, because that's how you keep a dog out of the vet's office. But of course, that's going to be antithetical to the vet industry, because it keeps dogs out of the vet's office.
That's right.
Of course. So how can we trust them?
That's like a doctor coming out and saying, we take a stance against humans eating anything raw. We take a stance against humans eating fresh fruits and vegetables. That is exactly what that is, my friends, okay? It is insanity. And everything you said about vets and their training in veterinary school, exactly the same thing goes on in Western medical establishments. It is Western medicine. It's just transferred to animals. That's exactly what doctors learn. Nothing. nothing about healing,
That's about health,
nothing
right?
about health, nothing about diet, nutrition, how you are what you eat. Oh, diet has nothing to do with it. Let me do this $10,000 surgery, and then you'll eventually die. But before you die, I'm going to take all your money because you're going to be giving me money for all the pharmaceutical drugs you need because I took out your organs, so you can't function without my drug anymore. It's crazy. Okay, science, veterinary medicine is exactly the same system, my friends. Thank you for bringing that up, Nora, and thank you for knowing about it.
Right.
It's crazy. Yeah, so vets are contributing to disease. If the dogs and cats and other animals weren't sick, they wouldn't be in business. So it behooves them to do exactly what Western medical doctors do: suppress and radiate and control, put a toxic slathering on instead of actually, what is your dog eating? What is his or her water quality? Is she or he getting fresh air? Is she or he earthing? Like cats, so many obese cats. I see so many obese cats because they're indoor cats. They're not outdoors. They're not getting fresh air. I mean, of course they're obese and sick. Cats are not meant to eat.
That's mostly about kibble. I mean,
right.
So many people feed their cats kibble.
Yeah, kibble and then not earthing and not having that earth energy to detox. Like you were saying, the toxic load. One way to unload the toxic load is to earth, for humans too. So yeah, the vet industry is just insane. And what's wrong with treating symptoms that our dogs or cats have with herbal and homeopathic remedies? Because I know you write a lot about that in your booklet too. How do you feel about that?
Well, the problem with medicating dogs and cats with drugs, obviously, is drugs are very toxic. Even when they take a symptom away, they're toxic, and it really doesn't take the symptom away. It just puts it in another place, and we call that a side effect. But there are lots of drugs on the market that are being given to dogs and cats that are known to cause really bad reactions in humans. And we don't know for sure that they cause the same reactions in dogs, but we can speculate that the range is there. And there are some drugs that are being given to dogs that are known to cause suicidal tendencies in humans. Well, when a human is medicating their own symptoms, that's fine. That's their body. They can choose to do that if they want to. But they also know when they're taking that drug, hey, I'd rather have the symptom back. This is really awful. The symptom was better than this. These so-called side effects are really bad. I mean, can you imagine being a dog and feeling so bad that you just wanted to die, but you have no idea why, and you just have to suffer every day, while your owner gives you that pill every day. Sometimes for things as, trivial as hyperactivity. They're drugging dogs with Rimadyl or whatever for hyperactivity. I don't know what all they give Rimadyl to dogs for, but that's just one that comes into my mind that produces really bad so-called side effects in dogs and humans. But the problem with treating symptoms with herbs and homeopathics is that you're still suppressing a symptom. Wow. It's not adding to the toxic burden as much as drugs, but it still is adding to the toxic burden, and you're not doing anything to address the cause. What you need to do, those things can be useful sometimes in managing symptoms, but you should only manage symptoms when you've tried absolutely everything else. When that's a last resort to manage symptoms. So when you remove the cause, when you change your dog's and cat's health or diet, and when you even fast them, we need to talk about fasting as well.
Yes.
When you do all those things and the symptoms, and you allow enough time for the body to heal, and you tweak the diet so that you're doing the right thing. Sometimes it takes a little bit of experimentation. But if you get to the end of 6 months or a year or whatever, and the symptom has not gone away, the symptom has not gotten any better, then you can determine, this is something that I might need to manage for the rest of the animal's life.
Yeah.
Or if an animal is injured and they're in pain, sometimes homeopathics or herbal remedies can be helpful in managing pain. But a lot of times, dogs and cats are pain medicated when the pain signal would otherwise tell them to rest. when you think about it, when you have a broken arm or whatever, yeah, your arm really hurts. But if you sit really still, the pain goes away. And that's your body telling you, I need you to be really still right now because that's the condition I need in order to heal.
Right.
And dogs get that same signal. And if they don't get the signal because they're on pain meds, they re-injure themselves.
Right.
And people wonder why these injuries never get better. I
Right.
mean, they just never get better. They, the dog limps for their entire life, or the injury gets so chronic that it just never heals.
I love that you talk about that. It's so important, and it blew me away when I was reading about that concept, which I guess would be considered, what is that called? Natural hygiene. Natural hygiene, just letting your body do its thing without even the aid of plant medicine. Let your body
it's all about removal of cause.
And removal of cause.
It's so beautiful the way it works. It's absolutely amazing the way it works. I mean, I have pictures of befores and afters of dogs who were an absolute wreck, and they were being seen by vets, and it's not like vets didn't have a shot at them. They did. And I mean, I know people who've spent thousands of dollars on vet bills, and then, oh, wait a minute, let's try this other thing. Let's try raw feeding. Let's try proper feeding or whatever. And they do it, and the dog gets well. And after months and years of suffering and vet bills and on, and it's just so simple, and it's so cheap, and it's so empowering. And that's what I'm about. I'm about empowering people to not be dependent on this industry that only profits and only sustains itself when we fail.
Yeah, amen, sister. You are amen, and that is why you're on this show. Well, you mentioned I love that you mentioned getting your dog off the poison and what's causing the diseases and the disorders and onto a raw, healthy, what they're supposed to be eating diet. And I just want to mention, I do that with humans too, and a lot of pet parents give up really quickly, like in the first few days even, because their dog has diarrhea or vomiting or other symptoms. But I just want to say that is detox. That is the chemicals coming out through their skin, through their crevices and cavities. Like, that's just detoxing. So stick with it because it's worth it. It's worth it to have a happier, more energetic, more loving, more well-balanced, less barky, less anxiety-ridden dog and human. You do it for yourself too. So go through the detox, stick with it. It's going to be amazing at the end. Have you seen a lot of detoxing with the dogs that you transitioned from poison to health? Poison and food to health.
Some of that is manageable. I mean, like if a dog has a skin condition, that stuff that's coming through the skin, and that's what's causing the problem. It's, the organs of elimination are overwhelmed and they can't handle all of the waste, so they send it out other orifices. They send it out, the body sends it out through the skin, and it irritates the hair follicle on the way out, and sometimes it gets very inflamed and the hair falls out and all of that. And that waste that's still in the body, that's still in the fat cells, it's still floating around in the bloodstream, doesn't go away right away. It takes a couple of weeks, sometimes months, for a dog's skin problems to clear up. But I usually give it 6 months for skin problems to clear up. Ear problems go away much faster. Any other symptoms like digestive symptoms, people often will try and transition their dogs slowly by combining raw food with kibble, which is a mistake because that can sometimes alone produce vomiting and diarrhea. Mm-hmm. And in fact, sometimes when people do that and that happens, they go, oh, well, I've had enough of this raw business, and they give up on raw food entirely because that never happened when they fed kibble, right? So instead of understanding that kibble and raw just aren't good friends, digestively speaking, and when you mix them up in the stomach, it sometimes produces such a mess in there that the dog's body doesn't know what to do with it, and it just has to get rid of it. If its mess happens in the stomach, they vomit. If it encounters kibble farther down in the digestive tract, then they'll sometimes get diarrhea, but that's just the body shooting water into the colon so it can get rid of that mess.
Yeah.
But and the way to avoid that is by transitioning the dog, by fasting the dog for a day to make sure that everything is out of the colon before you start feeding raw food. And when people do that, they don't encounter any of those problems. They might have a continuation of the symptom while the body continues to clean out, but they're not going to have the diarrhea and the vomiting.
Wow, that is so interesting. Yeah, the detox elimination process is so fascinating. Good. Okay, good. So stick with it, pet parents. And then the other diet that you talk about, and actually I heard you mention on the YouTube video with the awesome Nora Lenz, you mentioned a process that you call Gorge and Fast. You talked about one-day fasting, but what is this Gorge and Fast model of feeding, and what are the benefits? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I kind of touched on that a little earlier, but basically when they watch wolves, and they watch wolves a lot, researchers do, and wolves will make a kill, and they'll eat a huge pile of food, and then they don't eat for a while, and that seems to be the pattern, and that seems to be, in my experience, the pattern that produces the best health in dogs. And there's an author that I quote a lot. His name is Mogens Eliasson, and he's actually taken a lot of those wolf studies and incorporated them, as I do, in the way he feeds his own dogs. And he says that since I personally don't have a dog, so I don't do a lot of experimentation, but he has, and he has found that when he feeds his dogs using this Gorge and Fast model, where he allows them, he knows what their capacity is, and he allows them to eat to their fill, and then he doesn't feed them again for another 2 days, 2 full days. So he ends up feeding them 2 or 3 times a week. And he says when he does that, they stop this foraging, hunting, always looking for food, begging, licking the bowl, loitering in the kitchen behavior that you see in dogs, always looking for crumbs and whatnot. They stop looking for food because they're satisfied. The stomach of a dog, it has a tremendous capacity for expansion, much more so than our stomachs. And so we have to think, there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because when they eat, when they have the opportunity to eat, they have to be able to get down a lot of food, because it might be a long time before they eat again. Yeah. So when you do that, if you have, what it takes emotionally to be able to skip a day of dog feeding, then you're, rewarded with a healthy dog.
I'm doing it.
But the fasting part, so people love the gorging part. They could gorge their dogs every day. They love doing that. It's the fasting part that they're not so crazy about. Nobody, vets don't talk about fasting. Nobody talks about fasting. Everybody equates it with starvation. It's cruel. It's not cruel if if there's a reason why you're doing it. I just finally found a book that was written by a vet in 1959 who talks about fasting his dogs. He's extremely rare. There's maybe one other vet on the whole internet that talks about fasting therapeutically, and that means an extended fast, more than, a day or 2. But this vet whose book I just read, in fact, I have it right here. It's called, and it's really hard to find, it's called Natural Care of Pets.
Nice.
And it's written in 1959 on a typewriter, it looks like. Wow. But anyway, he says that he has fasted animals between 1 and 50 days, depending on their pathology. So he would diagnose the problem, and then he would fast them for, varying durations. And he says he always saw amazing results. You can't say that about any drug therapy, that you always see amazing results,
right.
But he did. Anyway, this is 1959.
Wow.
And I have also fasted lots of animals. I had an injured cat one time. I think a lot of people have had the experience where one of their animals has been injured and the animal refused to eat. Well, that worries people, because the vet industry is always telling us, when your dog starts eating, you have to take him to the vet right away. When dogs fast themselves all the time, just because they're overloaded with the crap that we feed them every day, and they sense that they need to back off on food. So it happens all the time, but, vets try to make people think that it's pathological. It always means that there's a problem. It sometimes, rarely means that there's a problem. But anyway, one of my cats was injured one time, and I offered food to him every day for 10 days, and he did not eat for 10 days. He ate on the 10th day, and that was when he finally put weight down on his leg. And he didn't see a vet that whole time. I didn't take him to the vet. I didn't want to subject him to that. I wanted him to heal naturally.
Right.
He went to the quietest, darkest place that he could find in my house, and he stayed there. He came out, once a day, limping, not putting any weight on his back leg. And then finally on the 10th day he ate. But I've had lots of experiences with therapeutically fasting. In fact, this dog that you're seeing in the background here was about probably 3 years ago. She had a huge hot spot on the side of her face, just a oozing, ugly mess that the owner had tried everything to get rid of. She did topicals, she did homeopathic, she did antibiotics, she did everything that you could name to get rid of this thing, and it was just getting worse and worse. I have pictures of it. I have pictures before and after her fast. And the owner asked me what I would recommend, and I said the only thing I know that cures up that sort of thing is fasting. And she said, okay, just do it. And she has 2 dogs. She wanted them to be fasted together, so I fasted them both for 8 days.
Wow.
And by the 8th day, the dog went home after that, like on the 9th day. But by the 8th day, when she was starting to eat again, it was healing. It was almost gone.
Wow.
And then it just continued to heal after that, even though the dog went home and was eating, her normal diet that had caused the problem in the first place. But even that 8 days gave the body enough leeway, enough of an easing of the burden that it could direct the healing, to take care of that enormous mess.
Absolutely. When I work with my human clients, it's just the same for all beings. It's the same concept, overarching broad stroke. When I work with clients with extremely catastrophic diseases or chronic illnesses, that's the first thing I recommend, fast. Because digestion is such an intense process on the body. When your body can stop digesting, and especially digesting poison, which a lot of dogs are eating, and humans, just give your body a rest so it can use that energy to heal. It needs that energy that it uses for digestion to heal that broken leg, to heal that tumor, to dissolve that tumor, to heal that cancer, whatever it is. Like, it's fast. And believe me, your body will rejuvenate. You'll hear God. Everything else gets better, but the catastrophic disease will get better. And it sounds like it's the same for dogs too. That you've
particularly the really bad foods that dogs and people eat, because it takes so much energy to digest foods that are inappropriate for the body they're going into, and just have so much garbage in them, so much indigestible waste in them.
I wanted to actually ask you, this is coming back to something from before. When you're talking about dogs that are unhealthy, overweight, holding on to fat because they're eating chemicals, yes, eliminate the cause. Yes, absolutely. But B, how can you tell that your dog is overweight or obese? What is a dog's body supposed to look like? How do you know if you need to do a fast?
Yeah, good question. I think people tend to think that if their dogs are straight from their shoulders to their hindquarters, that they're slim, that that's normal for a dog. Because when we're straight, think of a man having no love handles from his, shoulders to his hips, being straight, you think that's a nice, toned, slim man. Well, they apply that same logic to dogs, and it doesn't really apply, because dogs are not supposed to be straight. They're supposed to have a curve at the stomach area. Their abdomen is supposed to be tucked underneath. They're not supposed to be, their ribs are not supposed to be filled out, and there's not supposed to be even that. If you have that, that bowl shape underneath, that's obesity. A dog can be fat even without having that rounded abdomen underneath. Even, most dogs that vets see are fat, and they think that that's normal, but it's not normal. And so people that properly feed their dogs should need to be prepared to hear, oh, your dog is so skinny, your dog is too skinny even sometimes. And, they'll ask me, how can I put weight on my dog? Well, I tell them, you can put weight on your dog, but you might have to deal with symptoms, because what you need to do is watch for symptoms. If your dog has lots of energy and never has to go to the vet and never gets sick and, just day in, day out, month in, month out, has nothing but high energy and no symptoms at all, then you can ignore the weight.
Yeah.
And especially if you try to feed in order to put more weight on a dog, and then you start to see the ear inflammation and the lethargy and other symptoms too, possibly, then that's when he was good before I needed to just, change my expectation about what my dog should look like. And It's the same with humans.
Right. Too skinny is actually not too skinny, but skinny is what they're supposed to be. They need to be agile to hunt.
Right.
They need to be skinny, toned, agile in order to actually catch prey. So too skinny in a vet's view is actually healthy. My dog is looked at as too skinny sometimes. First of all, she's a brick house. She's all muscle. She's so toned because she does exercise a lot. And she eats all raw. Well, here's actually, we have like very little time, but I want to touch on everything because you're the master. My dog had a prolapsed rectum. I don't know if you know what that's caused by or could have been caused by. Do you? Oh.
Well, misfeeding.
Well, yeah.
Always misfeeding.
Yeah, probably.
So it's just some mistake that you're making with the diet, and we just need to go over what you're feeding and tweak it a little bit, and the problem will go away. I mean, I don't know if she still has it, but
no, she has
these things tend to be cyclical. They'll crop up, and then they'll eventually resolve themselves, and that works in the vet's favor, because nothing lasts forever. I mean, even these symptoms, they don't last forever. They're cyclical. So
wow, like, do you think a prolapsed rectum, if it was just left alone and I fed her properly, could have healed itself? Because they had to push it back in. But before, and this is again another video, and I'll send you my boyfriend's essay about it. But the jacking and the psychosis in the Western veterinary industry. They first quoted us $6,000 surgery. Oh, we have to do colorectal surgery on your dog. I'm like, why don't you just push her rectum back in? Like, thank God I knew of a case, my friend whose dog just got it pushed back in. We went to 2 animal emergency hospitals, and that was the first thing they suggested. Push $6,000 surgery. Antibiotics, vaccines. Why? Why vaccines for a prolapse? How about you just take care of the damn problem and push her anus back in? But anyway, okay. So point being is she fasted for an entire month after that. We only gave her raw, fermented, non-pasteurized, obviously, goat's milk. How do you feel about that? Is that like...
Yeah. That's removal of cause, because, I mean, milk it's composed of the same things that, meat is. It's got a lot more water in it. And some people even call it liquid meat. So it's not like goat's milk is a natural food for dogs. I mean, how would dogs get goat's milk, in the wild?
I wish they sold dog's milk,
it's
but they
close
don't.
enough.
Yeah.
You could have fed her anything. You could have made juices for her for 30 days. You could have made... And people do that too. They'll I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Lorraine Day. She cured herself by juicing. She cured herself of breast cancer by juicing, and she chose to juice mostly carrots. So she decided that carrot juice was miraculous. There's something just so amazing and healing about carrot juice. Well, it wasn't carrot juice. It was removal of cause. What she did was she took the cause of the problem away, and she didn't burden her body with dealing with that problem, which was a bad diet,
right.
Among other things, for 30 days, and it allowed the body to heal. So you could fast with water only, you could give broth, you could give juices, you could give raw milk. Yeah, any of those things are fine, and the dog's going to heal. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Did the right thing.
That's awesome. Well, we sometimes even just intuitively, I just give her, if she's had so much food the day before, or she got into some something like in a park and ate it, and she's just eaten so much the day before, we'll just give her goat's milk for the day. Just a little bowl in the morning and a little bowl at night. So like just intuitively, I've been fasting my dog. But I've got to reread your booklet. It's so chock full of incredible science-based, very logical, practical, reasonable, amazing information, Nora. I just salute you for taking the 20 years and more to actually compile this information, research it, do your due diligence to get ourselves and our pets healthy. I cannot thank you enough. God, I mean, there's just so much more that I wanted to talk to you about, but we're kind of out of time.
Me too.
There's
That's
so
right.
much. Well, what do you have anything else that you want to add to this very, very important topic about the furry loved ones in our lives and feeding them optimally?
Yes, just in case somebody, people in the Seattle area happen to be watching this, I am going to be making a documentary that's going to follow three dogs from sickness to health, and in 6 months, and they will get no medication, no herbs, no homeopathics, nothing like that. They'll get only proper feeding, and I'm going to follow them and on video, and I will do instructions in a kitchen showing people how to prepare food. We're going to do a shopping trip to the grocery store to show people where to buy food and what food to buy. And at the end of my video, people won't have to wonder how to keep their dogs well. They'll know everything that they need to know to just implement the information. So I have one dog. I have a hot prospect for number 2 dog, and I still need number 3 dog. So I'm looking for candidates. I'm looking for owners who are willing to try something besides the vet, treadmill, the repeating door, whatever you call it, rotating door, revolving door of the vet's office, and try raw feeding. And I will teach them how. I will even provide the food for 2 weeks, and they'll be able to watch their dog get well and know that they contributed to the world being a better place for dogs, at least for the dogs who belong to owners who have open minds open enough to entertain, raw feeding.
You're amazing. This is so exciting to me, and I might have other candidates for you. So we'll talk off camera. But actually, I have one more question before I let you go. The rescue community, that is such a hot topic. Like, I know that everyone thinks they're doing so much good by rescuing dogs, etc. But you talk about how is the rescue community contributing to the epidemic of chronic disease in dogs and cats? Could you talk about that?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, the vet industry has infiltrated every outlet they can in order to spread their methods that are very profitable. And they have formed partnerships with the shelters. There's a new shelter that's being built in the city where I live that's huge, state-of-the-art, very expensive, multi-million-dollar project, and they already have a partnership in place with the biggest veterinary school in the state. And so what that does is everybody that adopts from a shelter gets a commercial for the vet industry because the animal is fully vaccinated and they're medicated and they're wormed and they're everything that could possibly, create profit for the vet industry in the future has been administered to the animal. And people who don't want those things, they're forced to either buy from breeders or adopt from people on Craigslist who just haven't gotten around to vaccinating, which is what I did. I don't know if the person couldn't afford it or if she just hadn't gotten around to it, but she had a litter of kittens and they were unvaccinated, and that's what I wanted. So that's what I was forced to do, even though I would much rather have just gone right down the street to the shelter and adopted, a homeless cat or kitten there. Wow. But the shelter workers are intensely supportive of the vet industry. There's very little in the way of holistic thinking in that. I mean, out in the general populace, you'll find, maybe 20% of the people out there are going, yeah, I think, removal of cause is better than pharmaceutical drugs, and I'm aware that pharmaceutical drugs are, not good. Well, it seems like in the rescue community, 100% of the people are all on board with this. If there's a problem, let's just medicate it. Let's not worry about what the cause was, or let's blame some little bacterium or whatever, and just give the animal drugs. And nobody's questioning that. It just seems very backward to me, but it's also very supportive of the whole status quo in the vet industry, the sick pet industry.
Oh, God, you are so full of knowledge. Yep, and folks, if you want your dogs not to have fleas, not to have worms, to be healthy and balanced, that's part of not being healthy and balanced. Worms, fleas, other bug bites, other bugs are attracted to acidic, well, dogs are more acidic than humans, but just to sick, out of balance animals. If you want your dog not to have fleas or ticks, you don't give them antibiotics and medicine and deworming medicine. You just eliminate the cause. I love that you promote that, Nora. I love that you talk about that. I'm so grateful for you. You've changed my life for the better. You've changed my dog's life and all the animals that I take care of, and I just cannot thank you enough for the work you're doing in the world. You are absolutely a humanitarian that I had to chronicle. And I'm so excited for your documentary because I'm a visual person, so the more I can see visually, and auditorily, I learn better. Even though your booklet is absolutely incredible and everyone should read it, even if they're not a big reader. Read Nora Lenz's booklet. I'm going to put your link on the bottom of this video. You can find her. You can find interesting, incredible, informative videos of her online, interviews, videos. Her websites are amazing. Nora Lenz. Just look out for her. Here, watch this video if you liked it. Thumbs up. Thank you for subscribing. And stay tuned for Nora's Supercharge My Dog documentary. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Do you have any last words for us, even though we already said last words?
The website is nomorevetbills.com.
That's right.
And the film will be Supercharge My Dog.
Supercharge My Dog, baby. That's what Nora's doing every day, and you can contact her if you want to work with her personally. I know plenty of dogs firsthand, that's how I found her, who have transformed and transitioned away from sick to healthy because of Nora's teachings and Nora's healing work with the dogs. So, everybody, holler at Nora if you need more information. If your dog is sick and you want your dog to be well and vibrant and bounding through the fields like my dog is, holler at Nora Lenz. She is a font of information and an incredible, huge-hearted angel on earth, only wanting to help. We love you. I'm so grateful for you, Nora. Thank you so much. NoMoreVetBills.com. I'll have the link right below here. She's easy to find, and she is important to find. So everybody, keep yourselves and your dogs and your cats and your animals healthy, and stay tuned for more interesting, exciting, informative info from Nora. I hope you come back on the show soon.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being had. It was fun. It's always fun talking to you. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Be well, everybody.